Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you for coming to our webinar this afternoon. I'm Daniel Logus. I'm the Director of PD at the System Office for College and Career Readiness. And this is the first in a series of 10 or 12 monthly webinars that Lindsay is putting together on career pathways and topics surrounding career pathways. So today is advising in CCR, the key to a successful IET. This is an encore performance of what she and James did during NCCC, similar to the COABE webinar we did earlier this week. It was an encore performance. And so we're so excited to have so many of you here. We ask that you keep yourselves on mute. We'd love for you to turn your cameras on because it just helps us to present better, to know that we're not talking to a black screen. But we understand if you can't. Welcome. This is being done by Lindsay Tipton. She's the Director of Career Pathways for CCR at the System Office, and James Thomas from Central Carolina, who is the Director of YouthBuild there. So take it away, Lindsay and James.
All right. Hello, everybody. It's nice to see you all here today. Thank you for joining us. One of the things that we really wanted to focus on this year in CCR was advising. It is, as we will talk about in a moment, a required component of an IET and not something that we probably put enough focus on last year. So everything that I know about advising, I learned from James Thomas, who was my coworker when I was with the YouthBuild program at Central Carolina Community College. He can tell you a little bit more about himself in a minute, but he, before coming to YouthBuild, worked with Trio SSS. So he had lots of good advising practices from there. And so I was like, if I'm going to talk about advising, I need James with me because I'm just saying all the things that he taught me. So anyway, we will go ahead and get started. Please feel free if you have questions. Lee was kind enough to say that she would monitor the chat for us. So if you have questions, throw them in the chat. I forget on Zoom, I think there's a little hand raising thingy. Yes, there is. So raise your hand or whatever, but feel free to chime in, and then we will try to leave some time at the end for questions and answers. So if you want to go on to the next slide, Lee, that would be great. All right, so hopefully we'll go through this part real quickly because I think most of you on here know what an IET is, but IET stands for Integrated Education and Training, and that is when we offer Title II services in combination with workforce preparation activities and workforce training. And we offer those three things concurrently so that where students are enrolled in all three of those things at the same time and contextually. So if a student is in a program where they're learning about construction, then their adult education information would be contextualized to construction to as much of an extent as possible. So the kind of equation down at the bottom sums it all up. All right, thanks, Lee. You're good. All right, so why advising? Number one, it is what is best for students. So everything that we do should be guided by what is best for students, and advising for all students is important, but I would say even particularly for students who come through our adult ed programs. It supports your program as it leads to better completion rates. James will talk in a minute about some of his tools or ways that helped our students complete. I would say James is not afraid to pick up a phone, and James will hunt you down and make sure that you come to class. So he is the most persistent person I've ever met, and that led to our really good completion rates in the YouthBuild program. And also for post-secondary enrollment. So a lot of our students might not follow through with everything that they needed to in order to continue on to post-secondary enrollment if it were not for advising. It serves to establish and maintain a connection with internal and external partnerships. And lastly, it's in the law. So if all those other things aren't good enough reason to do it, then maybe because it's in the law will be a good enough reason. But WIOA Section 3 defines a career pathway as a combination of rigorous and high quality education, training, and other services that, among other things, Part C includes counseling to support an individual's education and career goals. This is just kind of a visual pulled from the WIOA vision of services that just talks about that comprehensive intake and how getting to know students at the beginning, which we will talk about a lot throughout this presentation and offer some tools for you to help you do that. All that information that you gather when you first meet a student and that you continue to gather as you work with that student impacts all these different areas that that touch a student while they are with us. All right, and I'm going to turn it over to James to tell you a little bit specifically about the YouthBuild program.
All right, hey everybody. I am a little bit under the weather, so if I cough while I talk, pardon me, I'm sorry. But like Lindsay said, I am currently the director of YouthBuild at Central Carolina Community College. Lindsay and I started this program from scratch together a few years ago. And I was the original assistant director, and Lindsay was the director, and we sort of put the program together and got it off the ground, and are both very proud of it. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the program model, a little bit of history of the history of the program at my institution, and then kind of talk about how advising works in the program, and some of the tools that we use to help folks progress throughout the program. So, excuse me, to begin with, YouthBuild operates, well, let me start off by saying YouthBuild is a Department of Labor grant program. We work with folks who are 16 to 24 years old who have dropped out of high school, need to complete an HSE or their adult high school, and need some vocational training as well. So all of our students are co-enrolled in one of three career pathways. So they're in their HSE classes, and then they're co-enrolled either in culinary construction or CNA. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but that's sort of the gist of what we do. The grant cycle is 3 years. So it runs for 2 years of active programming, and then everyone gets 1 year of follow-up, which we'll talk a little bit about in a little bit more about later on. But as you can see, like I said, HSE vocational training, there's a leadership development component where students work on leadership skills in 3 areas. So personal leadership, small group leadership, and civic leadership. There's a guaranteed year of follow-up services where we're making sure that everybody has what they need to be successful, whether or not they've gone on to college or a job. And then the 3 main ways that we support our students directly are through a stipend. They can earn up to $400 a month. We can cover the cost of transportation, and we can help with childcare. At CCCC, Central Carolina Community College, YouthBuild has been around since 2019. That was the original grant that Lindsay and I worked on. We were refunded for another grant in 2021, and then we just started our 3rd grant cycle this year. We started that first cohort in August, so we're currently running, finishing up grant 2 and starting off grant 3. So next slide. Yeah. So a little bit about sort of our advising philosophy, right? I remember when Lindsay and when we applied for the job originally, it was described as implementing an appreciative advising approach informed by an intrusive advising model. I'm not going to go too much in depth about what both of those things are. I'm sure some of you have heard those terms, but basically appreciative advising is a model. In a general sense, it involves asking a lot of open-ended questions and helping a student sort of build a vision for what it is that they want out of their life, and how whatever the educational component is that you're working with them in informs that vision, right? And then intrusive advising, the idea is sort of you're trying to get to barriers before they pop up, right? So having as much data on the front end so that you can sort of head problems off at the pass. So that's sort of all of these tools that you'll see that we use are modeled on these 2 advising philosophies, right? And not only just the tools, but the way we interact with our students and the way that we advise them. So each participant is paired with an advisor as they come in from day one in the program. And each advisor is responsible for a particular pathway. So, for instance, excuse me, before I was director, I was responsible for our culinary pathway. Our assistant director now is responsible for the CNA pathway. And then we have another person on staff who's responsible for the construction pathway. And those people know in-house in YouthBuild, know all that there is to know or what they need to know about that particular vocational pathway, right? So there is a needs assessment that's done as soon as a student comes in, that asks questions about what barriers they might face or problems that they have had in academic settings in the past. And that becomes a part of the student's folder, so that when the advisor meets with them, they can refer back to that initial needs assessment, especially in those first few meetings, to see what sort of needs or they have, what sort of barriers they face, and what sort of either in-house or referred out resources we can offer. And then every student also has an individualized service strategy plan. That's a fancy way of saying it's a document that Lindsay and I created that tracks progress on each piece of the program. So it tracks progress on their HSE tests, their CASAS tests and level gains, their vocational credential progression, as well as goal statements from each meeting. So we're real big on goal talk in YouthBuild and goal-oriented advising, right? So each meeting involves looking at short-term and long-term educational and professional goals, and then re-evaluating those each month whenever an advisor meets with their advisee. And all of that is cataloged in the ISSP, which we'll show you in a little bit. And then, so we say, excuse me, a monthly meeting. So a student comes in, they interview for the program, they complete the needs assessment, they go through orientation, they're paired with an advisor, they have that first advising session where they start their ISSP, begin cataloging their goals and their what they want to achieve. And then they have monthly meetings thereafter to sort of officially sit down and look at that document. Lindsay did a good job of reminding everybody the first time we did this presentation that while it says we have a monthly meeting, it's really probably more like daily sometimes, but at least weekly, right? So the way we bill the advisor relationship to the students when they come in is this person is your touchstone while you're in the program. So yes, you're going to meet with them monthly to officially discuss your ISSP and discuss these goals, but we're constantly interacting with our students on a day-to-day basis. If issues pop up in class or if there's some sort of need that arises, right, like the advisor is typically the go-to person for that.
And I just want to interject for a second, James, if you don't mind, just to say, like, we are fully aware that we were very fortunate, or James still is very fortunate, to have a grant that provided a lot of funding to be able to do a lot of these things. And so we know that not everybody has the funding to be able to have all these extra positions and everything, but there are, tangible ways that you can implement these things into your programs. And so I just want to because at the end of when we did this last time, at the end, people were like, but you had all this money. And we were like, yes, that's true. And I think I just saw it pop up in the chat if we could share the needs assessments. And yes, we're going to show them to you in just a second, and we will send them out to you afterwards. So things like those assessments, and then also, looking at the staff that you have in your programs and how you could utilize those staff as advisors. And you can talk about in a little bit some more of the structure of how we did that, but really the importance of everybody kind of having somebody who is tracking them. And for us, it worked really well to do that by pathway, but obviously everybody could do that however they wanted. But I did just want to be upfront about the fact that we were fortunate to have a lot of money to implement this, but I see it as my job to help all of you implement something similar to this without a DOL grant. So,
yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, we're very lucky that we were at full staff. YouthBuild is 4 positions, so a director, an assistant director, and then 2 support staff that work directly with students, and 3 of those folks carry a dedicated caseload. So yes, very, very fortunate to have the funds to be able to do that. All right, next slide. Yeah, so this is kind of the advising process, and I've already spoke to this a little bit. Also, I had a thought. Let me step back and say all three of our career pathways, Lindsay, we probably should have said this at the beginning, are approved IET IETs. So we run them that way, and they're registered and approved. And but anyway, the advising process again, right? So the needs assessment happens as early as possible. We try to have an initial meeting with an advisor within 30 days of enrollment. Usually that happens that happens far sooner than 30 days. And then monthly meetings to adjust goals through 6 to 9 months of active programming. So let me take this just so that you all are aware of how this works. So when we say 6 to 9 months of active programming, every student comes in and begins in active programming. That means they're coming every day. They're going to their HSE classes. They're going to their vocational prep classes. They're going to workshops for career development and leadership development. We also do, everybody does 30 hours of community service with Habitat for Humanity. So on Fridays, they're doing that. That's their active programming piece, right? And that's when the bulk of this advising really happens. So you're looking at, if you're in the program for 9 months, 9 monthly meetings, over the course of which you should be coming up with a plan for what you want to do whenever you get out of YouthBuild. So our goal for everybody and one of our performance measures is having everybody placed in that year of follow-up, either in a job or further education, right? So the purpose of this plan is to make sure that we have an ideal and a goal placement whenever they get through. So those monthly meetings are adjusted throughout the 6 to 9 months of active programming. Referrals to outside resources is necessary. So I'm sure any of you who work directly with students in a CCR setting see similar needs, right? So we refer out for mental health resources, substance abuse counseling.
I'm sending it to you.
Sorry. Oh, that might not have been for me. But anyway, yeah, we refer out for anything that we can't handle in-house, right? And then, so one of those positions that I talked about, one of those 4 positions is a job developer. And the job developer works with the students while they're in active programming to kind of bolster their career readiness skills. So everybody works on a resume, everybody works on how to write a cover letter, job searches, interview skills, things like that. But whenever a student begins to transition into follow-up and they're done with their 6 to 9 months of active programming, there's a sort of soft handoff from the advisor, if it's one of the other staff people, a soft handoff to the job developer where that student knows, okay, you're moving into follow-up. Your new point of contact is the job developer, right? And we still work together hand in hand very closely. The job developer has access to the plan that the student has developed, the ISSP, the needs assessment. They have access to all the same materials. It's just the student is moving into a new phase of the program. New students are coming on the other end, and that advisor is taking on a new caseload of advisees. That's just kind of how our process works. It might not be pertinent to what you do in your particular programs, but yeah, so there's a soft handoff where the student knows they're going to be working with the job developer. All right, so this is our needs, part of our needs assessment. I don't think we included the whole thing, but like Lindsay said, we will share it with you whenever we get through this presentation. But and none of this is really original to Lindsay or I. The YouthBuild, when you get a YouthBuild grant, you get access to a vast repository of like model and sample documents that other programs have used, and everything that we have, we've tweaked all of it, right? Like Lindsay did a very good job of making it more, I'm not good at formatting things like this. Lindsay did a good job of making it much more functional, but we pulled all of this stuff from different places, right? So yeah, so we ask, check areas that you would like assistance with. So, and all of these things that you see on the left, So study skills, time management, computer skills, financial literacy, note taking, most of these we hit either in the HSE classroom, the vocational classroom, or some workshop that we do, whether or not that's a career readiness workshop or a leadership development workshop or some other sort of activity we do. But students are able to indicate on the left which of these they're interested in. On the right is some of the more like concrete stuff. So questions about like childcare, housing, problems at home, transportation, substance abuse, lack of family support, mental health issues. We ask them to sort of gauge it on a scale of 1 to 3. This is one of the things that Lindsay simplified. When I did it originally, it was like a 6-point scale, and Lindsay came to me and was like, why do we need 6 when we can do 3? I agreed. It made it much more simple. But this is just a tool where the advisor can go back in that first meeting and say, and a lot of these things we've learned before that first session, but like if a student indicates mental health issues related to yourself, right? That might not come up as quickly as transportation and childcare might, because we ask those things very, very soon, so that we are very, very early, so that we can get them squared away with those resources. But something like a mental health issue or medical issues or substance abuse, right? Like if that comes up in the first advising session, that gives the advisor a chance to refer out to a community resource, or to talk through something like lack of family support, or college resources for lack of access to technology, whatever that might be. So all right, next slide. Yeah, there we go. And then this is and the rest of the ISSP is similar. You'll see after the meeting, whenever we share it with you, if you look through it, a lot of it may not be pertinent. The first part of it is a lot of stuff that we need for our data management system, but the rest of the ISSP is similar to what you just saw, sort of just gauging need and barriers that a student might face. So this is the ISSP. This is the first page of the ISSP. So this is where we track progress through the program. So you can see one of the first things is, reading and math CASAS test scores. Our students, we also pay them bonus payments. So we track whether or not they got a gain. Really, the students are just interested in whether or not they get their $50 for making their gain. But that's one of the things we always go over in an advising session is, when's the last time you CASAS tested? Did you improve? How do you feel like you're doing in class? That sort of thing. Oh, okay. I see a question. How long is a typical advising session? I would say it varies. Mine are actually pretty quick. So like I would say I spend 20 to 20 minutes, 15 to 25 minutes, depending on how talkative a kid is. Now, Lauren, our assistant director, she gets through one kid every time we set aside an hour for advising during the week. So it sort of depends. And I don't think that means her sessions are any better or worse. It's just a style difference, right? Like I'm just pretty quick and to the point, looking at the goals, talking about where you are, what do you need. Lauren just has a different style. So it varies. I would say, anywhere from half an hour to an hour, down to 15 or 20 minutes if the kid isn't very talkative. But good question. So yeah, we track their CASAS test scores over there. We do the VARC and the ONET with everybody to gauge, sort of as a starting point to ask some questions about career development and how they feel about the classroom setting. I always say that this sounds cheesy. Like when I'm talking to the kid, I always say, I know this is going to sound like a cheesy question, but this is part of that appreciative advising philosophy, right? So this is one of the very first things we talk about in that first advising session is, what is your vision for your future? Excuse me. And I always just ask them to give me a couple sentences, right? And it typically boils down to, they always have some sort of dream goal, right? Which is fine. I did too. I still do have dream goals, right? But it always boils down to some sort of version of financial independence, self-sufficiency, and then sort of realizing whatever those goals are that they have in place. But I think it's important to get them, to get the student talking about that as early as possible. And then the last thing I always say at this part of the first advising session is, sorry, I was looking at some of the questions come through. I'll hop down to these in just a second. I always, one of the last things I do in that first advising session is go back to this vision for your future question and say, everything we do for the rest of this advising relationship is about these two sentences, right? Like, you've told me what your vision for your future is. We've kind of talked about what you want to achieve. And like Lindsay said, I am known for calling and bothering and knocking on doors and getting kids in class. And I tell them in that first advising session, when I do those things to you, sorry about that, when I do those things, when I'm hounding you about being in class, it's because, I want these two sentences to come true. So don't hold it against me. I'm just holding you accountable to your goal, right? All right, next slide.
I noticed some stuff in the chat, James. Tyler asked, how would you apply for a YouthBuild grant?
Okay. Yep.
And
so,
there's another question above his as well from Brian.
Okay, I see. About how many students do you serve as advising a given semester? So, excuse me. The first question about how many students do we advise in a given semester? So, the way a YouthBuild grant works is you are funded to serve a certain number of students. So, like, for instance, this current grant that we just started, our third YouthBuild grant, we're funded to serve 76 kids. And you've got a 2-year period to do that. So basically it's some math where you say, if I'm going to have 4 cohorts, I'm shooting for X number of students per cohort. And a cohort lasts 6 to 9 months. So we shoot to have about 16, 17, 18 kids in a cohort. I think is the number we landed on, up to 20. That's about what we hit. So you got about 15 to 18, 19 kids in a cohort, and you split those by 3 pathways. So for instance, so this answers the bottom part of your question, how many different programs can they choose from? There are 3. So construction, culinary, CNA, you might have 5 in construction, 5 in culinary, and 8 in CNA. And then those get divvied out, those numbers get divvied out as a caseload to whoever's in charge of that pathway, right? And then you've got students at different parts of the program. So they, the CNA advisor might get 8 new advisees, but they might have 3 or 4 that are still active. The construction person may only get 5 new advisees in a cohort, but they may have 5 or 6 that are still active, right? So that's kind of how that works. And then how would you apply for a YouthBuild grant? There are funding announcements every year. You can Google, what's it called, Lindsay? FOA. Just Google DOL FOA YouthBuild, and you'll see announcements for those grant applications opening. Student age restraints, yes, 16 to 24. Oh, there we go. Okay, Lindsay's already answered that one. When you apply for a YouthBuild grant, so this question, do you choose the pathways or those 3 specified by YouthBuild? So every YouthBuild program has to offer construction. That's kind of the original YouthBuild vocational pathway. Excuse me. But then there are what are called construction plus pathways, which are, for us, that is culinary. Those are culinary and CNA. But you can choose from a wide range of, as long as it's an industry as long as you can make the case that it's an industry recognized credential you're offering in a given pathway. Some programs have hospitality and tourism management tracks. I've seen IT. Help me out, Lindsay. What are some other ones? HVAC.
Yeah, and kind of when you apply for a YouthBuild grant, basically what you have to do is like that little block that we have on the IET template, where we say like, how is this IET or this vocational skill profession needed in your area? It's kind of like that on crack. Like you have to do pages of justifying like that there's a need in your community for that profession, making sure that students who come through YouthBuild to train for that job would have an opportunity in their in the area they live in to get a job in that area, and that it would lead toward a sustainable wage. So kind of all the same things that we focus on the IET template, just in much more detail for to get it approved through DUL for a YouthBuild grant.
So there's some leeway in what you choose outside of construction. Like Lindsay said, just some labor market data and industry recognized credential, making sure that's what you're offering. Yeah, cool. All right. So, excuse me, this is, these next two pages you see are still in the ISSP. The one on the left is where we track HSE progress and their vocational credential, as well as just some bits and pieces that not everybody might do, but most everybody does. So like a lot of our students pursue OSHA 10 on sort of a at your own pace basis online. If you're in construction, so if you see NCCR, that is our construction credential. All of those kids go through OSHA 30 training or have the opportunity to. Some do CPR. Making it work is a curriculum we've used in the past, sort of a soft skill development, career readiness curriculum. We track their volunteer hours once they've completed them, and then just some of the other workshops that we have.
That grid actually came out of one of our audits from our DOL. Our federal project officer came out and said that they want everything was documented in the ISSP in different places, but they wanted kind of one page where you could see when everything was done, but also was really good for a lot of our students who are visual. It was very rewarding for them to be able during those monthly meetings to check off the boxes of what they had done. So that helped them to feel a sense of accomplishment and to feel like they were, and sometimes you just pull it out when somebody's having a bad day and just say like, look at the progress you've made, look at the things that you've already done, and let's just focus on one thing that we're going to do next. And just kind of helps them to see like what they've done, what they still need to do, and just to have that kind of see it all in one shot. So they made us do this, and I think I was kind of annoyed about it at the time, but it also kind of did serve a good purpose in those advising sessions to just give a big picture.
Yeah, absolutely. And then this last piece is sort of the to me, outside of the checklist, like Lindsay's saying, one of the most important pieces, right? This is the monthly goal sheet, right? Where we talk about their personal goals, their educational goals, and their professional goals. Excuse me, and then any referrals. So we always do a short-term and long-term goal for each of the two main ones. Those get, that looks different for everybody. Short-term for some people is finishing their high set in 2 months, and for some people that's a year, right? So it's very individualized, but the student gets to look at this sheet regularly and sort of reevaluate it every month. And it's just another place to see what they've accomplished and what they've got ahead of them, right?
All right, so let's see. First, we've got a question. DOL mentions this is pre-apprenticeship model. Are any YouthBuild programs tied to apprenticeship NC? We kind of explored, we worked with our apprenticeship person at Central Carolina to try to set these things up, and that was done on a more individual basis. So we had some students who were ready to move into apprenticeships, and they did that, but that was kind of pretty individualized for certain students throughout the program. All right, so the next few slides, we wanted to just kind of show you, based on real people, kind of how these advising practices helped students progress. So if you've talked to me for any length of time, you probably have heard me talk about Bailey. She has become almost like a family member to me over the years. So Bailey was one of the students in our very first cohort in 2019. She came in, she came to her interview and was with her dad. She came with her sister and her sister's boyfriend. They had been at the local food pantry and saw a flyer for our program. Because when we first started out, we just went all over the place. We served Lee, Chatham, and Harnett. So we just went everywhere and put flyers and met with people and shared information about what we were doing. So they all saw one of our flyers at the local food pantry and contacted us and came in for an interview. So she was super shy. She had dropped out of school when she was 16, because she had some intense anxiety, and both her parents struggle with addiction. And so she said, it was really stressful for me to go to school. My mom and dad didn't really care whether I went or not, so I just didn't go. but was a strong student, wanted to learn, was eager to kind of get out of the lifestyle she was living and have something better. So she started with us in August when she was 17. She actually turned 18 during our orientation period. By October, she had completed her GED. And then one of our favorite days was taking students to get their uniform. So our construction students would get their tool belts and everything, and our CNA students would go and get their scrubs. And I know it's not that good of a picture, you can't see it really up close, but just the look on their face when they see themselves in a professional attire, and just how that really changes them in so many ways, just to like really be able to see themselves in a role such as that. So that was always a really exciting day. That next picture is she and I sitting there, probably with James standing in the doorway telling us what to do, because like I said, everything I know I learned from him. But she was filling out her college application. So once she finished her GED, she was done with that piece, but we were still guiding her through her vocational training. And so she was still in the CNA program, but knew that she wanted to start taking classes to go into medical sonography. So one thing that I cannot stress the importance of enough is taking your students on tours of your campuses, because Bailey never knew about medical sonography. She'd never considered that as a career, had never really thought about it. But during our orientation period, we went on a tour of the campus, of actually all 3 of the CCCC campuses. And when we were in the sonography lab, she was like, this is really cool. Like, I would love to learn more about this. So we sent her over there for a day, paired her up with somebody so she could go shadow over there for a day while she was still working on her GED. And then she was like, I really want to work on the prerequisites that I would need to take to apply for that program. So she finished her GED, was still in her CNA class, but then was applying to the college so that she could take classes to help her be ready to apply to that program. The next picture is Bailey sitting with one of the college advisors. And so when she was applying, he was kind of sharing with her, these are the classes that you need to take before you can apply to the sonography program. One of the things that I think is important to note here, and to me, the key for advising is just building relationships. And so, yes, we would have those monthly, like half-hour long sessions or whatever, but the real meat of it all just came day to day when they would stop in my office and say hi between classes, where they would text me or email me. Well, they didn't really email very much, but just the more casual communication, that's when I really got to know them, and where they really shared their stories a lot. So when Bailey was meeting with this advisor, he asked her something about if she had any issues with food insecurity. And she said, no, we're fine. Well, just that morning, she had asked me if I could help her get some groceries. So, she wasn't fine, but she didn't know him, so she wasn't going to tell him that. So, once you really form a relationship with your students, once they trust you, they know that you care and that you're there to help them, that's when you're really able to connect with them and offer them the support that they need to get through these programs. So then that next picture is Bailey in her sonography uniform. She was one of 6 students who was accepted into the program. So super awesome for her. Also, throughout the course of these pictures, she also experienced homelessness twice. So she was in a motel at one point, the foundation, and she spoke about all this at Convocation at Central Carolina. So I'm not giving away her business that she hasn't already been willing to share with people. But so during the pandemic, she was staying in a motel, and luckily our foundation was able to help her pay for that. So again, just like being in touch with them, knowing what's going on in their lives, knowing what support that they need. I remember her sitting on the bed in a motel room working on her college class homework. So she has gone through a lot, but made it into the sonography program. This next picture is one of my very favorite YouthBuild moments. It still gives me chills when I look at it. So that is Bailey with Lisa Johnson, who was the Dean of Health Sciences at Central Carolina Community College. She's now at Alamance. But she was on the interview committee when I applied for my job. And because she was the Dean of Health Sciences and Bailey was in the sonography program, she was involved in some of our different events and stuff that we would have. She would come speak to our students. Well, when Bailey was doing her one of her clinical experiences at a local medical facility. Lisa came in because she came in as a patient and Bailey was there working. And so it was just such a full circle moment. And Bailey had actually also received a scholarship that was named in honor of Lisa's mother. So just a really cool full circle moment. And then there's a picture of Bailey with her medical sonography cohort, and she is set to graduate in May with her degree in medical sonography. So she, in 2019, came to us as a high school dropout who was homeless. And by the end of spring semester, she could be starting a job making about $60,000 a year. So, but I just, like, without the advising piece, she probably would have left us about 25 different times. So like, she has, just like most of your students probably do, she has got hard stuff going on in her life and, just needs a lot of encouragement. You can do this, focus on going back to that original question, what vision do you have for your future? And just coming back to that, like, okay, this is the vision you have. This is where you want to be. What do we need to do to get there? And so that's the biggest thing, is that there's so many times, and I've even said, gosh, if I were some of these students in their situations, I don't know that I could pull through the way some of them do. Like, I can completely understand why people give up, because their lives are hard. So that advising piece is just so, so important. All right, next. So this is Janae. The reason that I think about Janae when I think about advising is because Janae came to us as a student who was working toward her adult high school diploma. She was determined she was going to get it. More importantly, her grandmother was determined that she was going to get her adult high school diploma instead of her GED. Janae told us early on that she was not a morning person, and that she was going to sleep, and she did. And she would get into her classroom, she would sit down at the computer and put her head down, and she would sleep for 2 or 3 hours. But then she would wake up and she would do more in the last hour of the day than most of the rest of the students did in the whole time that she was asleep. So she was super smart. She worked really hard. But then COVID hit, and she wasn't able to keep up with everything that she was doing with adult high school. And so she needed my office has all these windows, and people, even when they can tell that I'm speaking, they just knock on my window and want me to look over and talk to them. So sorry, that was distracting. So when COVID hit, she wasn't able to keep up with everything. And so we had lots of conversations with her and with her grandmother about, look, she knows what she wants to do. She knows what she wants to go to school for. If she continues on at this rate with her adult high school, at the rate she's been achieving things, she will be done in about 3 or 4 years. But if she takes her GED tests, she is likely to pass them right away, and she can go into college and she will be in the same place. And so ultimately that decision is completely up to you, but these are kind of your options. And this is where both of these things can get her. Well, they decided that it would make sense for her to switch to her GED test. And this was right when we started back up testing during COVID. And so we got her transportation to get out to the one campus that we were doing testing on. And 4 Wednesdays in a row, she went and took one test each day, passed them right away, and she was done. So just kind of another way that advising works to just really make sure you're laying out the options, telling people, this is what you could do. This is what the timeline looks like. This is where it'll get you, and just making those decisions. And also sometimes when they're young, sometimes that involves communicating with the parents too. We didn't have to do that very much, but every now and then. James, are you there to talk about Devin?
I am. So sorry about that. I had to turn my camera off for just a second. YouthBuild. I had people knocking on my door too, Lindsay. So Devin came in to our program from a local area high school, sort of in a situation where wasn't making as much progress as he wanted to. Looking at the timeline of when he was going to graduate was sort of discouraging him a little bit, but a super bright, super smart kid, sort of like Janae, in that up front he was like, look, I lose interest easily. You're going to have to work with me, and if I'm bored, I'm probably just going to trail off and not do very much. So on the left, this was during our orientation week. This was like one of the very first days. That orientation week we call YouthBuild DOL calls it mental toughness. Lindsay and I didn't like that name at all, so we changed it. We call it YouthBuild Challenge, but pretty much it's just an orientation week where they're not really in the program yet, or a couple weeks where they're not really in the program yet. They come and do some team building, might do some community service. They're already enrolled in HSE. We get them enrolled over there, and they're going to those classes, just kind of feeling out their readiness for the program, right? So this on the left was Devin during one of those community service days where we were out working on trails at a park. Devin came in and picked the culinary pathway. Had originally wanted to do something in IT, like as his long-term goal. But we, when a kid has a long-term goal that doesn't match up with one of the pathways that we have, we always encourage them, pick something you're interested in, finish your HSE while you're doing it, your high school equivalency, and then we can, get you over to the curriculum side or Con-Ed, whatever, to pursue whatever it is that your long-term goal is. So that was Devin's original plan. He picked culinary and loved it, fell in love with culinary. I think he was as surprised by it as everybody else was. But like I said, super bright kid, finished his HSE very quickly, finished his, his credential that he got with YouthBuild. And then on the far right, that is him on his very first day of curriculum level culinary classes, where he started pursuing his associate's degree. So in the span of about 6 to 9 months, somewhere around 6 or 7 months, Devin came in, got his first credential with us, actually ended up getting some credit by experience that went towards his college courses he wanted to take, got his HSE, and then moved on to the curriculum side, and had a really, really solid first semester, passed all his classes, did really, really well. Decided to take a break, which a lot of kids do. That's fine. But he is planning on jumping back in and finishing that culinary degree, and is working in the culinary field right now. So sort of a mix of several different types of success, right? He finished several credentials with us, got started with a job, got started in college, and is doing really well.
So when we presented this a couple of weeks ago, somebody raised their hand at about this point and said, so all of the examples you're giving our kids who were like really strong academic students. And so what about students who aren't? And I was like, that is a really good point. And it didn't even occur to me when we created this, that those happened to be 3 students who were very strong academically. So I don't even know if I told James that I threw this one in there, but I also love Justin's story, because when Justin came to us, his high school dropout counselor reached out to us and said, this kid is in, I can't remember. A lot of times we got people that said this kid is in 9th grade for the 3rd time. I don't remember. I feel like Justin might've been one of those kids, but I'm not sure. But anyway, she said, he's really struggling. I don't know that he could pass the high school equivalency tests, but maybe if he came to YouthBuild, he could at least get a vocational credential that would help him, if he didn't finish high school. But she's like, he's not gonna hang on with us. And so we're trying to find something that we can give him. So he came to us, and I put this first picture in here when I was looking for pictures, and it cracked me up because Justin loved the ladies. And so he was very distracted by the ladies. So a lot of our advising was about making good choices at school and how you can keep yourself on track. He also was somebody who kind of felt like he had to, like, sweetest kid in the world, felt like he had to like save everybody and be there for everybody. So his phone was a big problem, and he was convinced that he had to have his phone out in class because his friends needed him. And so, we had to do a lot of work with him on that, like what is your priority here? What do your friends want for you? What do you want for yourself? And we tried to never take anyone's phone away, but we would have lots of conversations until they came to a point where they were willing to leave their phone in an office while they went to class if it was a big problem for them. So that is something that happened with Justin. I was going to say he passed all of his high set tests on the first try, except the math test. And that was because he had a girlfriend waiting for him in the parking lot. And so he rushed through it. And so the ladies interfered once again, but he did finish his high set. He passed all of his tests. The math was the only one I think that he had to retake. and he also earned his construction credential. And so that picture on the end is him and his family at our graduation holding up his credentials. So and the takeaway from that is a lot of times people kind of come at me with like, well, these IETs, these kids, you know, like school is hard for them, and now you want us to teach them some sort of vocational training too, and now it's going to take them twice as long and they don't have the time for this. But Justin is the perfect example of it didn't take him long at all. And it's because he was, number one, he was in a place where he was comfortable and he felt valued. And number two, he was so excited about his construction classes and he loved those classes. So he came in every day because he was coming for something that he really loved. And then the more he was successful at that and felt good about what he was doing and built his confidence, that carried over to his HSE classes. And that confidence helped him to really do well in those classes. And again, the contextualization. So taking those classes that were helping him prepare for his high set and contextualizing that to the construction field that he was interested in, that is what brought him success. So it doesn't necessarily take longer. I really found that for a lot of our students, I think they finished their high school equivalency and a vocational credential more quickly than they would have completed either one of those on their own, because they complement each other really well. So that is Justin's story. So just kind of to wrap things up, some of the key points: advising is about relationships, getting to know your students and building that trust, making them feel like you really want them there, making them feel respected and valued, no matter what background they bring, having honest conversations about barriers. So really getting to know what is going to keep you from being able to finish this, whether it is their housing situation, their food insecurity, their cell phone, their girlfriend, you know, whatever it may be, just having those conversations and helping them brainstorm different ways that they can address those barriers. So not only are you helping them address the barriers so that they can continue on with their education, but then you're teaching them the skills for how to do that on their own in the future. Having honest conversations about goals, transition to curriculum or continuing education. So thinking about, when you're done with this, what do you want to do next? Do you need to go get a job right away? Do you want to go to college? Do you want to get a degree? Do you want to get another credential? So just, and this is what this would look like. This is about how much money you would make doing this. This is about how much money you would make doing this. This is how long it would take you to do this. So giving them that information and letting them make goals for themselves with all of the information that they need to be able to do that. And then developing useful tools like the needs assessment and the ISSPs. And again, we will, I'll send those out either this afternoon or tomorrow in an email to all of you. And James and I are both big believers. Like James said, we copied those from other programs and just tweaked them for us. We're big believers and don't reinvent the wheel. If there's something there that you can use it. So feel free to take those and use them however you'd like. James, do you have anything that you want to add to that last slide?
No, that's you said everything really well. Like Lindsay said, we're just happy to share anything we can, and none of it is original to us. So anything we can ever do to help you think about how you could implement any of this where you are. We work really closely with the CCR team here, right? So I have plenty of ideas about what that could look like. So whatever context you're in, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to have any sort of conversations that might help you implement some advising where you are.
All right, so we've got 6 minutes left. Are there any questions? You can put them in the chat or you can come off mute and ask. All right, well, you know where to find me. If you come up with questions that you think of after the fact, feel free to email me at any time or email James. And like Dan mentioned at the beginning, we're doing different sessions like this every month on different topics around career pathways. I think next month, Dan's getting ready to send something out, but I think next month is going to be pathway partners connecting career pathways across programs. So how to work with different programs like continuing ed or curriculum or HRD. So how to kind of cross this among different programs to really make a nice streamlined pathway for students. So you'll be getting information about that one soon. But it was great to see all of you today. Thank you for joining us. I hope you have a good afternoon.